All right, so this was the last slide. Before we do this, if you want to insert a slide or you want to do something, we're going to do a higher power example again, okay? So if my exponents are higher, let's say this said 35, okay? Yesterday we talked about if they were even, what's not in my answer, actually. If they're even, the i's not there. If they're odd, the I is there. Then we have to figure out if they're positive or negative. If I take this number, divide it by 2, well, if I take off the odd one, and divide by 2, if it's even, then it's positive. If it's odd, then it's negative. So if I separate out the I, the odd I, out, and then I look at 34, 34 divided by 2 is 17, 17 is odd, which means this is negative I. That is one way to do it, but you have to remember that trick. The other way to do it is always separate it out if it's odd, but then I can rewrite 34 as a power of 2. So I can say I squared raised to the 17th times I. And what is I squared? Negative 1. And if negative 1 is raised to an odd power, what is it? Negative 1. So this would be negative I. So that's the other way to look at it. You don't have to remember the even odd rule, okay? You would just raise I squared to the power that would produce that product. And then every I squared is negative 1. So like using that, if it said I 122. First of all, give me the two options my answer is going to be. Negative 1 or positive 1. I will not be in this answer. That's because it's even. So then if I did I squared, it would be raised to the 61st power. Because I did 122 divided by 2. And then negative 1 to an odd power means what? It's negative 1. So there will be a question with a higher exponent on your test, and you will not have the time to write out 35 i's. So make sure you understand how to do it without having to expand that. All right, now the last question in the notes from yesterday was the quadratic formula. We've talked about the quadratic formula a lot, but now we're going to have quadratic formula with i's. This is not on your test on Tuesday, but it will be on the quiz that is the end of next week. So next Friday, you're going to get quizzed on just 2, 5, and the quadratic formula, okay? So it is then. So quadratic formula is x equals negative b plus and minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2 times a. A here is 4, B is 12, C is 15. So negative 12 plus and minus the square root of 12 squared minus 4 times 15 over 2 times 4. Negative 12 plus and minus the square root of 144. Now I can multiply this out in any order. 4 times 15 is 60. 60 times 4 is 240, and it's minus that over 8. 240 minus 144 is 196. But it's negative. I'm sorry, not 196, just 96. Keep going. There we go. Just 96, but it is negative. So it's negative 12 plus and minus negative 96 over 8. With me so far? All right, now the negative underneath comes out as the I, so negative 12 plus and minus I root 96 over 8. And I have to see if this can get broken down. So 96, 3 goes in here 32 times, 2 goes in there 16 times, 2 goes in there 8 times, 2 goes in there 4 times, 2 goes in there 2 times. And then for each pair of 2's, one of those 2's goes to the outside. So I'm bringing out 1, 2. I'm bringing out a second 2. And the 3 and the 2 that don't have a partner stay underneath. So negative 12 plus and minus 2 times 2. If we bring 2 things to the outside, we multiply them. So 4i square root 6 over 8. All right, then can I reduce this? Yes. What goes in all three of those spots? 4. This would be 2. This would be 3. And this would be 1. And I'd get negative 3 plus and minus I root 6 over 2. And you could literally leave it like that. Or I could split it up. Negative 3 over 2 plus and minus root 6 over 2i. You cannot simplify the root 6 and the 2 because one's under a root and one is not. So it would stay like that. But either of these answers are acceptable if it's open-ended. If it's multiple choice, the bottom one will be there. Questions? Relatively quickly so we can get through as much as we can. All right, so simplify. For number 1, we're going to distribute, and when we distribute, we'd get 45i minus 27i squared. That I squared becomes a negative 1, making this plus 27. And then we're going to rewrite this in standard form, because if it says to write it in standard form and we don't want to lose stupid points. Okay, make sure if it said, it didn't say it on this review, on the warm up, but I did put that instruction on your test, write in standard form. Yep.
Does I always go second?
Yep.
If we don't do second, it's wrong.
I'll probably take maybe a point, but yeah. Yeah. All right, number 2, I'm going to take out I first. And I'd get I square root 20 plus 3i square root 45. I'm going to break these down however you choose to break them down. 4 and 5 gets square rooted as 2. So 2i square root 5 plus 45 is 5 and 9 gets square rooted as 3. 3 times 3 is 9i square root 5. And then they both have I and they both have root 5, so I can combine these to 11i square root 5. You can also write this as 11 square root 5i. I'm not going to mark either of those wrong. Just be really careful and do not put the I under the root. If the I is under the root, now it's wrong. Okay, so be really careful. That's why I would recommend this over the other one. All right, for 3, this has got an I in the denominator, so we have to rationalize it. And it's not going to say rationalize. It's going to say, it actually says, perform the indicated operation and put it into standard form. Indicated operation here tells you have to get rid of that, okay? So I'm going to multiply both the top and the bottom by 5 plus I. In the numerator, I could use the squared shortcut, or I could FOIL it out, 25 plus 5i plus 5i plus I squared. 25 plus 10i minus 1, because this becomes negative 1. And I get 24 plus 10i in my numerator. Don't forget about your denominator. This is your special case. They are conjugates, so I can do a squared plus b squared. A is 5, b is 1. It'd be 25 plus 1 over 26. And then we can reduce. This, and this are all divisible by 2. 12 plus 5i over 13, and it can stay like that. So save yourself the extra step of splitting it up. If you split it up, 12 over 13 plus 5 over 13i, it's correct, but it is one more step you don't need to take if it's open-ended. If it's multiple choice, that would be it, but this is not multiple choice. All right, then 4 is your quadratic. So A is 16, B is negative 4, C is 3. Negative 4 would be 4 plus and minus the square root of negative 4 squared minus 4 times A times C all over 2 times A. 4 plus and minus the square root of 16. I could do this in any order I want. 4 times 16 is 64. 64 times 3 is 192 over 32. Negative 192 minus 16, so I would do 192 minus 16, 76, and it's negative. So 4 plus and minus the square root of negative 76 over 32. 76 breaks down into, wait, did I do that wrong? It's 176, 176. Okay, take your time, be careful. 2 and 88. 2 and 44, 2 and 22. 2 and 11. We good now? Yeah, okay. 2 2's come to the outside. Another 2 2's come to the outside. And the I comes to the outside. So 4 plus and minus 4I square root 11 over 32. And now they're all divisible by 4. 1 plus and minus I root 11 over 8. Totally did that on purpose to prove a point.
Yes.
All right, we good? Yes? Okay, again, quadratic, not on Tuesday's test, but on Friday's quiz, okay? All right, so we're going to move through the concepts of this. I'll work through as many examples as I can, but obviously, if we're good on things, I might move a little bit faster, okay? Camilla. All right, so we're going to go through 2, 1, 2, 2. We're on your quiz, okay? But refreshers on those. For the standard form, you're putting something into standard form. I tried to give you one in your review that was yucky numbers, so you get a little bit more accustomed to it. For time purposes, this one, it goes in evenly, but the one on your PDF does not, okay? So remember that if there is a number on the front, you have to take it out. I'm going to first group these together. I'm going to take out that -3. The -3 is coming off of both of these terms. So x squared minus 4x, I'm going to leave this space because I'm going to fill it in plus 1. Again, the one on your review has a fraction. So does the one on your test. Now I take b, which is 4. I divide it by 2 and I square it. 2 squared is 4. I add it inside the parentheses. To balance this side of the equation, I would normally subtract it from outside the parentheses. But because I took something out, I have to multiply it by that first. -3 times -4 means I'm actually now adding 12. -3, x minus 2 squared comes from square rooting the first term, square rooting the last term, taking the sign from the middle, putting it in parentheses and squaring it. And then 1 plus 12 is 13. I did not mark you off if you forgot the f of x or equals y, but technically that is part of your answer. I did take it for the inverse one because you have to say that that's a different equation, but I didn't take it from this one. Technically that should be equal to f of x. Now from here we can answer vertex and axis symmetry, which is what it's going to ask for. Vertex is 2, 13, opposite of what follows x, and then the number on the outside. And my axis symmetry is x equals 2.
Because the axis of symmetry is always k.
Yes. No, h.
Yeah.
H, yeah. Now let's say I had an extra couple minutes. I went all the way through the test. I finished my test. And I'm done and I have a couple extra minutes. I can come back up here and I can check my b by doing negative b over 2a. I can check my h by doing negative b over 2a from the initial question. So negative 12 over 2 times negative 3 is negative 12 over negative 6. That's 2. That matches my h. At least you know that's right. If you have time, plug it back in and check your K2, okay? But at least you have time from there. So that one question has multiple parts. The way it will work is pretty much each part is worth 5 points. And I think there's 3 there. Complete the square, find the vertex, find the axis symmetry. Then, oh, this is all the stuff we just talked about. The vertex is your HK. The axis symmetry is x equals h. I actually took off the domain, the range, on this question. It's not on there. The intercepts I did on, did I put max min? Max min is on here, so there's 4 parts to it. Find its standard form, and then the vertex, and then the axis symmetry, and then maximum or minimum. So which direction is this graph facing? Down, which means there is a what? Max. You're going to circle which one there is. There's a max here, and then you're going to give me the value of that maximum, which is? 13, the K value of your vertex. This is going to come, I took this one off because it's going to come, you're going to find your y-intercept on the higher degree. Max min equals the K value. Question so far? Okay, then came Oh, don't even worry about this. So we're not going to, if you wanted to keep it in quadratic, you could redo that whole problem doing negative b over 2a, but I'm not going to make you do x-intercepts or y-intercepts, so just skip it. If you want to practice your standard form, there's another practice problem. So if you want to do complete the square, maybe I'll go back and do it on the video later. I'll do this one doing complete the square because that's not pretty numbers. Okay, I'll go back and do that later. All right, then came find the equation given the vertex and the point. It's going to happen again. So this is my hk, this is my x, y. Y equals a times x minus h squared plus k. You must know that equation. We plug in the h, the k, the x, and the y to solve for a. And then we plug back in the a, the h, the k. So I'm going to plug in my y is 5. My a is my unknown. My x is 2. My h is 3. Plus the k, which is negative 4. 5 equals a times negative 1 squared minus 4. 5 equals a times 1, which is just a, minus 4. Add the 4. Do not combine these, okay? You cannot do that. You have to move the 4, which makes a 9. And then if there was something attached to a, you would divide by it. Then we plug back in the h and the k. Careful here, because only a couple people made that mistake, but they did pull in the x, y instead. The h, k, and the a. So y equals the a, which is 9, x minus h, which is 3, squared minus 4. Questions on that one? All right, so we're going to practice complete the square with this one, okay? If I group together those first two terms, I get negative 3x squared plus 5x. I'm going to leave that space. I'm going to fill it in, plus 2. I have to take out a negative 3 here. Take out the negative 3, and it comes off of this one and also this one. So this becomes x squared minus 5/3 x. Leave that space, plus 2. With me so far? Take out the negative 3. So we're on page 2. You know where we are, right? Yeah. Okay. Just take out the negative 3. But just don't forget to take it off both. So that was a mistake some of you made on your quiz, is forgetting it to take it off the second term. Okay. Then I have to take the new second term, which is 5/3, divide it by 2, and then square it. Dividing by 2 is the same thing as multiplying by 1/2. So then I'd get 5/6 squared, which is 25 over 36. I'm going to add it inside the parentheses. And I would normally subtract it from outside the parentheses. But I have to account for what I took out, so I'm going to multiply by negative 3 first. A negative and a negative means this is going positive. 3 goes into 36 12 times. Reduce when you can. A lot of people try to wait, and it's a mess. So I'd be adding 25/12 here. 2 becomes 24 over 12 plus 25 over 12, or 49 over 12. Still good? Yep. So negative 3 stays on the front. Now I'm going to factor what's inside the parentheses. I square root the x squared. I get x. I square root the third term, or the c. I get 5 over 6. I take the sign from the middle, put it in parentheses, and square it. Plus 49/12. Now this should equal whatever letter was here. So this should equal f of x. I did not take the points from the quiz, but technically you need that. That's the whole quadratic function. Now from here, what's my vertex? Oh, sorry.
Why is it 5 over 6?
You take what's here and you square root both the top and the bottom.
Oh, okay.
So square root first, square root last, sign from middle.
Okay.
What's my vertex?
5 over 6, comma, 49
Good. So this is what we're doing different from the quiz. We're not graphing this. We're just finding the vertex, the axis of symmetry, which would be what?
It'd be x equals 5, 6.
Good. And then we're going to do our max or min. Does this open up or down?
Down.
Down, which means it has?
Max.
Good. And the max value is?
4, 9 over 12.
Good. So I modified it a little bit just for time purposes. You don't have to graph it. You don't have to find your x and y intercepts. You'll find your y intercept on the higher power one, but not on this one. So let's say you get all the way through. You're one of those people that works efficiently, didn't make mistakes. You have lots of time at the end. One of the first things I would do is come back here and do negative b over 2a to see if I get the same answer. Negative 5 over negative 6, that's 5, 6. That matches my x coordinate. And then I can even go the next step, which is plug it back in to get the y. Questions on that one? Okay. All right, then came 2-2. You had a question like this on your quiz. You are going to identify the end behavior. Remember, if it is a positive and an even power, that they both point up. Negative and an even power, and they both point down. You could say falls left, falls right, or rises right, rises left, or you could say both up or both down. If it's a positive and the exponent is odd, this falls left, rises right. If it's negative and an odd exponent, it rises left, falls right. To find your zeros, you're going to set f of x equal to 0, okay? And you're going to solve by factoring. There could be a lot of different kinds of factoring here. Greatest common factor. You could do factoring by grouping, okay? You could just do a regular trinomial where you're factoring. And then your multiplicity is the number of times the root occurs. What happens if that number of times is even? It bounces off the x-axis at that point. And if it's odd, crosses through. So just like on your quiz, it's going to ask you to identify your multiplicity. You're going to give me the little numbers next to your answers unless it's 1. And then it's going to say show, and you're going to show it on the graph whether it bounces or crosses through. So in this example, what's the highest exponent? 6. It's even. It's positive, which means both are up. Then I'm going to set it equal to 0. I'm going to rearrange this so the 6 comes first because I want it in decreasing degree order. It's going to make it easier to factor. I can take out an x squared, and I get x to the 4th minus 2x squared minus 3. And that can be factored a lot like we normally do, but instead of putting x's here, we do x squared. Factors of negative 3 that sum to negative 2 are negative 3 and positive 1. And then we split and solve. I get x squared equals 0, so there is a root at 0, but what's the multiplicity of it? 2, because that x is squared. I get x squared equals 3, so x equals plus and minus the square root of 3. That means negative root 3 occurs once, and positive root 3 occurs once. Do not write plus and minus and put a multiplicity of 2. That's not how it works. As long as the multiplicity is not other than 1. Yep. And then the other one, I'd get x squared equals negative 1, and x equals plus and minus the square root of negative 1. What's wrong with that? It's imaginary, so we don't count it as a 0. Your y-intercept you get by plugging 0 in for x, it would be 0. We know that because we have the 0 for the zeros. And then we're going to graph it. So I would plot a point at 0. I would plot a point at negative. Well, this would be -1. So negative root 3 is like a negative 1.7. Positive 1. So a positive root 3 is like a positive 1.7. My arrows both point up, and it bounces at the 0. So it's going to cross through, come back up, come back down, and cross through. I told you on your quiz I need 1 point in between each for the test. I'm going to let you approximate for time purposes. So I'm not going to nitpick how far down that goes, okay? If it's like that. Sure? Yeah.
How far down does it go?
You're going to approximate. You'd have to plug in 1 to find it exactly. You're going to approximate.
Okay.
Just for literal time purposes on your test.
So it doesn't matter.
For the test, no. So all that was on your quiz, okay? Then we did 2-3, which was long division, synthetic division. It's literally going to come in and say, I'm going to come back to these in a second. I want to go through all the topics first, and then I'll go back to the examples, okay? But it's going to say divide using long division. You cannot do that using synthetic. It literally won't. It will be x squared. So you cannot do it using synthetic division. Don't try. It will be wrong, okay? It's not going to say solve using synthetic division. Or divide using synthetic division. It will be built into something like this, where it says use the remainder theorem and synthetic division to find the value. So for this, I'm going to put -2 on the outside. I'm going to list my coefficients, making sure I plug in anything that's missing. Here I'm missing a 0x. So I'd get 3, 1, 0, -4. I'd bring down the 3. Multiply it, put it in the next column and add it. Multiply it, put it in the next column and add it. Multiply it, put it in the next column and add it. And just that remainder is my answer. Just as a reminder for when we set this up, this has all the terms from 3 down to none, but this one is missing my 0x. So I do 2x to the third plus 7x squared plus 4x minus 3 divided by x squared plus 0x minus 1, okay? And then it's first and a first. Do we know where to go from there?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, so just be really careful. And the question on your test is going to say long division. It's not like you can also do it synthetic. It's forced because it's going to be an x squared. And you cannot use synthetic division on that one, okay? It's designed that way for a reason. All right, then you're going to get, show that x is a solution of the third degree polynomial equation and use the result to factor the polynomial completely. List all the real zeros of the equation. What do we do here? Start with synthetic. I'm going to put the 2 on the outside. I'm going to divide synthetically. We're not going to make it all the way through time-wise right now. What should my remainder be? 0. Now I'm taking something that is raised to the third power and reducing it a degree. My answer is now going to be quadratic, in which I can factor, okay? We'll save the formula for next week. So from what you get to here, you're going to factor. And then when you list your answers, you're going to make sure you include 2 because that was given to you, plus the other ones you find. There are 2 graphing calculator questions. One has multiple parts, and that is this. Well, they both have, no, this one has multiple parts. It's going to say use the graphing calculator to find one root, find the remaining roots by factoring or using quadratic formula. I made it so that it is factorable for now, okay? You're going to list all your possible roots, which in this case would be 1, 2, 3, 6, 9, and 18. They are not all going to be pretty. There's going to be fractions. One of the whole numbers will be on your graph. So you'll go to your graph, you'll use your graphing utility, and you will find one whole number 0. From there, you'll put that number on the outside. You'll then use synthetic. Your remainder will be 0. And you'll take what's left and you will factor it to find the 2 remaining zeros. It's also going to ask you about Descartes' rule on that one. So remember, we count the sign changes for the positive. For the negative, we make x become negative x. And then we count the sign changes. And we always subtract by 2 until we can no longer subtract. So if I get 10, it's 10, 8, 6, 4, 2, or 0. You're probably not going to have to count 10, but that's the point, okay? And then all the stuff from 2-4. So we can go over this again on Monday, but I want you to do your full review as much as you can do because obviously 2-4 we just went over this morning, okay, or before this, or yeah. So you're dealing with your eyes. There is one more calculator question, and it's coming from 2-1, the parabolas. So it's going to be some sort of real world. I put 2 examples on your review. Some real world graph that you have to answer, like where's it hit the ground, what's the max height, that kind of thing. There are 2 examples on your review.